Good evening. My name is Allison Kaplan. I'm Director of Education at the National First Ladies Library, located at the National First Ladies Historic Site in Canton, Ohio. I want to welcome everyone to this evening's program, whether you're live with us on Zoom or Facebook streaming, or you're watching it later on. We are really excited. We had a great month of programs, and we're right into spooky season and Halloween. Next month, we're getting ready for the holidays, and we'll have some really great announcements about upcoming programs and activities. Related to our virtual programs and related to our site, along with our collaborators, the National Park Service. So before we get things started, hopefully you can all hear me. If you're having trouble connecting with us or having AV issues, please let us know in the chat, and we will always be welcome to troubleshoot with you. And we have a lot of great audience members who are seasoned Zoomers as well, who are very helpful in troubleshooting with me as well. We use the chat to ask questions. You can also use the Q&A to ask questions for our speaker at the end. We also encourage people to introduce themselves. We are lucky enough to have people joining us from all over the globe, and it's always great to hear where you are tuning in from this evening. So I want to tell you about some upcoming programs before I turn things over to Michelle. If you are local to us, or you are traveling and visiting the National First Ladies Historic Site soon, I want to mention we have a great exhibition that is now on view, Nancy Reagan, An American Story. It's a really interesting exhibition. It looks at Nancy's legacy, as well as what life was like in the 1980s, compares her experiences to other experiences of First Ladies in the White House related to social causes, dealing with personal issues like breast cancer. I just think it's a great exhibition. I really enjoyed giving tours of it, and it will be on view through early spring, but leaving soon are some important clothing pieces from that exhibition. So work on paper and clothing is really fragile. We're only able to have it up for a small amount of time. So we have some very special loans from the Reagan Library that are leaving us soon. If you are fans of glitz and glamour of 1980s Dynasty, if you love Nancy Reagan Red, please stop by National First Ladies Historic Site before the month is out and come and see us. We would love to have you there, and I will enable the chat. Thank you. So we can all talk. Here we go. Hopefully that will help. We have some other lectures and programs coming up soon that I want to mention. Our legacy lecture on November 2nd is Dr. Ludwig Depish is joining us to speak about Emily Donaldson, White House hostess for Andrew Jackson. Very interesting story, a lot of controversy involving her time as a hostess at the White House. It should be a really juicy talk. I'm super excited about it. Also coming up, our film series in cooperation with Stark Library. You can watch a film at home at your leisure and then join us for a discussion. We are watching a documentary about Geraldine Ferraro, the first woman to run as vice president on a major party ticket. That will be on November 8th. And we are going to be talking about the film with Dr. Sherry Strachan, who is director of the Bliss Institute at the University of Akron, and has written a textbook called Why Don't Women Rule the World? So we're super excited about that. Also, Monday, October 24th, we have Cooking with the First Ladies. We're going to look at revolutionary cooking with our friend Sarah of Cooking with the First Ladies. We're going to talk about Abigail Adams. November 28th, there's still time to pick up our book club book. We are going to be reading Julia Swagg's Really amazing book about Lady Bird Johnson. You can join us on November 28th for that discussion. It should be really fun. And as always, check out our YouTube page. This past week, we had a great singer in town and a composer, and we had a beautiful concert inspired by the First Ladies, and you can stream that on our YouTube page. I highly recommend checking it out, as well as some of our past programs, from panels to discussions to children's programs. There's really something for everyone. So we love interacting with you, and I promise to fix the chat once Michelle gets started here so we can chat about our favorite spooky images of presidents and first ladies. And without further ado, I am going to turn things over to Michelle Gullion, who is a curator and archivist by trade and our director of collections and research for the National First Ladies Library. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you, Allison. Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to see all of you again, well, virtually. Welcome to a really fun time with watching death scenes of presidents. As you know, or maybe don't know, I love Halloween. It's one of probably my very favorite holiday. And last year I did a program that was on the death of Caroline Harrison, who died in the White House. And this talk is kind of inspired by that. I got to really looking at some things that were going on and how her death was depicted. So I wanted to, we're going to kind of follow up a little bit with that. I'm going to start my program now with talking about Victorian death scenes featuring presidents and first ladies. Of course, oh my goodness, why is it not working? There we go. Oh, good news. All right. Of course, the Victorian era gets its name from Queen Victoria. And so that's kind of the time, the 19th century is kind of known as the Victorian times. And I'm going to ask you tonight to really think about what we use today to get our information visually. Of course, we have what we're doing right now. We're Zooming, right? With computers, but I know in my lifetime, I don't remember, computers weren't a thing, and technology has changed so much. So the Victorians, they didn't really have those types of things to use. They didn't have computers, they didn't have television, they didn't have radio. What they did have was newspapers. And then it wasn't until the 1820s before lithography really started being used. And so people could start to use prints. And it was up until then, you either saw a painting of something to get information from. And as we all know, the visual images that we see tell us this story. And it pulls at our heartstrings, and it pulls at what matters to us. We love a good picture that helps tell us a story. So that's what the Victorians were no different than we were, but they're using the print. And with the more common, once prints could be more and more readily available, they were being done to gather information and to help pull at our heartstrings. They're also influencing us. They're influencing us on our gender roles, where our station in life, who is important, who is not. And all these things are sending us clues to what we think of that we are as Americans. And of course, it's elitist, it's patriarchal, especially in the 1800s. And so those things are going to influence us too. And women's roles are seen, it's so complicated. I'm not going to go super deep into it tonight, but women's roles come from the cult of true womanhood. And there are four virtues that come from the cult of true womanhood. And those are the ideal lady is to exemplify piety, purity, submissiveness, and domesticity. So all those things come into play in how, in what a woman's role is. She is domesticity, and of course, within that comes the more religious education of the children and how she raises the children and how that's done. So this comes into play. Of course, with Queen Victoria here, as we see here, she in 1861, right at the end of 1861, her beloved husband, Prince Albert, dies. And she goes into full mourning, and she has her kingdom become they drape everything with black crepe. And this is the same time that the Civil War is going on in our country. And so this is being greatly influenced by the death that is happening and the drama of all of that's happening. Of course, this comes into mourning customs then. And Americans, we embrace mourning customs, especially the women do. This is our realm anyway of purity, piety, and religious education. And so we don the religious, we don our bodies that way. Men on the left-hand side there, they are everything that's opposite that. They are worldly, they are out there making business, they are doing things. So their time of mourning is not as seen as, they have more important things to do than mourn. That's what women do. So a male might wear, as this gentleman here is, he might wear an armband. He could wear that for a couple of months. It varied. You could also wear black crepe in your hat, as President Lincoln was doing for his son Willie when he was killed and was assassinated. And then the women were fully draped in black. This woman that you see on the right-hand side, she's very fancy in her black mourning here. However, as you can see, she does have some lace, and there's a white flower there at her neckline there. She is showing just a bit of white. That was acceptable to do after about a year. You could come out of deep, deep mourning, and you could start showing skin a little bit more and a little more color, white, violet, that type of thing. And of course, first ladies were no different than that. Here's Mary Lincoln. This is in 1862, right after the death of her son, Willie. Here she is in her mourning outfit. You can see the crepe that is on her bonnet, and as is appropriate to do for deep mourning. She's also showing you a little bit of white in her cuffs, and the flowers are a nice addition. It's showing that she's kind of returning to from her deep mourning. Probably one of the most famous first ladies for her mourning was Jane Pierce. Very tragically, she lost her son in a train accident right before the inauguration, and she plunged the White House into full mourning, drapery, all of the things, high Victorian things that you do for mourning, and as a mother for her child. Women also did lots of things with jewelry. They wore jewelry from the dead. They either wove it into jewelry, such as this fob that you see over here with the locket on the right-hand side. or they cut hair and wore a piece of hair on mourning jewelry in remembrance of the dead. Another thing that women did was they wrote on mourning stationery. This letter that I'm showing you here is from our collection. It's from written by Lucretia Garfield, who of course lost her husband to an assassination. If you can see, it's hard to see, but she puts the date on that as 1884. That's 3 years after President Garfield's death, and you can still see she is in deep mourning, and I think she continues that for the rest of her life, as did Ida McKinley. There were several first ladies and women who would always be in mourning for their beloved husbands normally. And this was seen as appropriate and something that was totally acceptable and actually admired. So now we're going to get into the death scenes of the presidents and the women, the first ladies' roles within these death scenes. This is the earliest lithographic print that I'll be showing you tonight. It's from 1835. Of course, George Washington died in 1799. So this is 6 years later afterwards. This is actually pretty gorgeous, I think. Not only is it showing you the death scene, but it's in color. Someone has really, this has been a fine keepsake for someone. What I want you to notice is that you are looking at, this is like watching kind of like reality TV for Victorians. What they're showing you here is they're showing you a death scene. And they're using some clues that this is a scene, it's like a drama play. Look at the curtains that you see that's draping. They're drawn so that you can now look in, and you are viewing, the viewer is looking in at the recently departed George Washington. There are many clues to what this means and how we are to feel about this. If we start on the left-hand side, at the very top, you see his general's hat and his sword. Of course, he was the hero from the American Revolution. He's the father of our country. And there's Martha next to him. She has quite a pleasant look on her face. She's a strong woman as the first lady of the land and the mother of our country. Their grandchildren are next to her, and her granddaughter, as is appropriate, she's showing you that females are, of course, mourning, and she's by having her handkerchief, although you do see her face. You have the physician, you have probably a clergyman. What is amazing about this print is that you have a very well-dressed enslaved man servant of Washington's who's depicting the devotion of him as the father of his plantation and of our country and of our nation. So he is looking, and he's very well dressed. Then this is really wild to see. There is an African-American enslaved woman kneeling in, not as well dressed, but she is not showing her face. She is mourning. She is mourning. We know that Washington freed his slaves. So it's telling us not really that, I'm not sure what it's trying to tell us, that even though he maybe saved his slaves, they're still sad that the father of our country has died. Interesting. In this one, again, this is from about 6 years later, 1870 or 1841 now. This is just a drawing. We see kind of an unpleasant look on Martha's face, but we do see her face. We see that the children are still mourning. We see that, we do see that her little son is mourning too. This is very dramatic. We have the curtains drawn out, and we are drawn into this deathbed scene. You have you still have his sword and hat from the American Revolution. Now it's on the lower right-hand side. And you have the slaves that are the well-dressed slave, and you still have this female slave who is weeping into her hands. This is definitely to draw emotion and importance to George Washington. And in this final scene, again, this one's from 1846, we see, again, very high drama, the deathbed, the curtain is drawn, there is Washington. We see the same kinds of things. However, now George Washington's granddaughter is, you're going to see this figure quite a bit now. She is in active mourning. She is weeping over really expressing her grief as a woman of purity and piety would do during this type of, at this time. Martha now is weeping. You still see her face, but she is weeping. She's also kind of on this interesting little throne there, which I find fascinating. And you have the enslaved servant, manservant, who's very close to George Washington. This may be like, I think there's Billy Lee. I think he was very close to Washington. I'm not sure who that's supposed to be depicting. This time we don't have the African-American woman kneeling and weeping. We have her standing, and she's probably going to talk to the other slaves and let them know that their master and the father of our country has passed away. Following this scene, following this, we're now going to look at the death of former President Andrew Jackson. And in this scene, what you're looking at here, again, you have your drama. Here's the curtain, it's drawn back, and here is the fallen president. Of course, Andrew Jackson's wife, Rachel, had already died. She died long before this time. She died in 1828. Right before he entered the White House. So what you're probably seeing here maybe is his on the left-hand side is his adopted son and his adopted son's daughter, Sarah York Jackson, maybe. I'm not really sure. They're not really mentioned, but this might be who they're kind of depicting. They're in keeping with George Washington. Isn't it interesting? Here's another president who owned slaves, and yet you have the manservant, enslaved man in this depiction too. The other thing that's really cool about this print is that look at that painting in the background there. It says, if you can read at the very bottom, the Battle of New Orleans. That is reminding us that he was the victory of the War of 1812, and this also makes him very important to our country. In this depiction of President Jackson's death, this I wanted to show you because this is 1865. I'm not really sure. I thought this was wild that this was done in 1865 because think about it, this is the end of the Civil War. And so maybe they're just trying to show you probably what's going on with the fallen fathers of our country, in keeping with Lincoln, because boy, when we get to Lincoln, well, you see a lot of this. You still are seeing a curtain, but it's not nearly as pronounced. What I wanted to really point out about this print is if you look on the right-hand side, you see the man and the woman that are standing there. Of course, these women are, of course, holding their hankies because they must mourn. But if they are identified as Mrs. Donaldson and Major Donaldson, that would probably be Emily Donaldson and Andrew Jackson Donaldson. What's so interesting about this is that Emily Donaldson, she actually died in the White House before Andrew Jackson. So whoever did this print didn't really realize that Emily Donaldson wasn't alive. Or maybe he'd remarried and this is his second wife. I'm not really sure. It doesn't matter. It's about the president, not the women. This is a depiction of the death of William Henry Harrison. President Harrison, of course, only served 30 days in the White House. He died of, well, some say pneumonia, some say consumption. Anyway, he became quite ill and died. He died in the White House. And so this is 1841. We still are having kind of some high drama here. We have the bedroom curtain. It's not nearly as pronounced. I think you have a sense that maybe this is the White House. It's got a sense of kind of, I think of largeness to it. At the end, when President Harrison died, his wife, Anna Harrison, was still in North Bend, Ohio. She had not been well, and she was also in mourning for one of their sons. And so she was getting ready to come to the White House. So what you're seeing there is just a woman mourning. You don't see her face. This is just a weeping woman. It could depict possibly his widowed daughter-in-law, Jane Irwin Harrison, who was with him and who gave a couple of parties before he succumbed to his illness. But I'm not really sure. And that's really too bad, isn't it? Because she doesn't really matter. She's just giving you this sense of the woman's role of being the mourner. And here again, we have William Henry Harrison's death. This is a little more dramatic. We have the curtain showing us the deathbed scene. And in the center there is the clergyman reading him his final rites as the woman weeps. In this portrait, or in this print from 1849, this is the death of James Polk. His wife, Sarah, I believe, maybe, is depicted in the white bonnet there, weeping at the foot of the bed. However, my eye always goes to the beautiful woman who's right next to his pillow, a young, vivacious looking woman. And I can't help but think, if you know anything about Sarah Polk, she was quite vivacious and quite lovely. And I have a feeling she would just as soon we think that that's really her. This one I love because this is really high drama, isn't it? We've got the curtain and we have that beautiful gold tassel coming down there in the center. Quite lovely. Next, we're going to look in 1850. Now, here's the death of General and President Taylor. He, of course, died in the White House. We are given a taste of the curtain. It's not very pronounced this time. Here we're seeing all the important cabinet members that are surrounding him. He died in the White House. They're not really sure whether he died of, they say he ate cherries and drank milk, and maybe the milk was sour. There's people who thought he was poisoned. They don't really know. He had some type of intestinal problem that was actually the end caused his death. In the foreground, you see his family members. He had several sons and daughters. Margaret Taylor was his wife. There is no known portrait of Margaret Taylor. With no portrait of her. There's a sketch that is drawn that was composited from family members saying this is kind of how she looked. But there is no image of Margaret Taylor. And for the artist, this is no problem because he can just make her a weeping woman. And that solves that problem. Next, we go to the very tragic assassination of President Lincoln. And here we are. This is like the play within a play kind of thing. This is like, for me, if you think of like a movie scene, this is showing you lots of kind of awful graphic um, things that are happening in here. You have Booth with his knife, of course, which he stabs that gentleman there that's in and I can't think of his name right now. And you have the gun going off. This is happening at Ford's Theater. So this is very, very tragic. And people are so caught up in this. And you can understand. You have Mary there who's pleading and really scared. And in real life, that was what people said they could hear. They could hear her screaming, as would just be horrific. Of course, he's taken across the street to Peterson's cottage. What I think is unique about this print is its foreshortening is so strange. You don't really see one like this ever again. It's pretty cool, but notice that there's all these men that are around him, surrounding him in the bedroom there where he passed away. And his two sons are there at the foot of the bed. There's Tad on the left and Robert with his back to us. They are present. There are no women in this depiction. And Mary is at the cot, is there with him, but she was not allowed in the room. This I wanted to show you because this is a drawing that kind of, if you've ever been to Peterson's cottage, I think this kind of looks kind of like Peterson's cottage. The only difference is it's much smaller than this. And no one could get behind that bed in that little tiny room. But it is cool because it's showing you more of we're getting a little more lifelike, aren't we? Gone is the curtain. This is real life. This is reality. And yet it's an artist's depiction, and he's showing you the important people in the room, the doctors, the generals, the cabinet members that are there. I wanted to show you this print of President Lincoln's death because this is showing you again all the important men. Again, all the men are in here, women are not. And this is because it's war, that our country's at war still, it's over, but it's just this terrible thing has happened. What I wanted to show you, look at what's really cool about this. To Lincoln's left, that gentleman standing there with his hanky to the side, that is now the new president, Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson is not there in this deathbed scene. Andrew Johnson's still in Nashville. He has to be brought to Washington. But what is this doing for the Victorian people? It's telling them, you see, our president, our father of our country has passed away, but here is the gentleman who will lead our country now, and he is here with Lincoln. It's sending you that message that he is part of the continuation and all will be all right for our country. In this deathbed scene, I had to show you, this is a little more dramatic, isn't it? We have I love the black crepe around this print. And you have the clergyman who's reading him his last rites. You also have President Johnson holding on to Lincoln's hand. Very neat. Again, we still don't have any women in this depiction. Mary did make it into a few of the prints. Here's one that was done that depicts her with Tad, her son, next to her. And of course, another woman who I think is identified as Miss Harris. And again, the women are doing their duty. They are included now in the mourning of the president. And in this print, which is very cool, you have again, here's the woman who is flailing over the deathbed scene. She is showing you the deep mourning. She is in high mourning. What's cool about this is kind of like in real life, Mary Lincoln she's over here to the side and she's turned away from everyone. She was not allowed in the deathbed scene when he passed away. She kept going in. When she would go in, she was begging him to give her the last words. And that was another thing that was Victorian. They loved the last words from the person who was dying. And of course, Lincoln never could not do that. And so she would sob so much that the men were like, just get her out of here. Very sad. What's cool about this one I wanted to show you again is that this is like Photoshop. If you really look at it, you see Mary, she's now on her knees mourning. But look at these gentlemen all around here. It's like they've taken their little heads and cut them out, and then they put them on bodies. And some of them work better than others. They're pretty fun though. And in this final scene, I wanted to show you this one of Lincoln's assassination. It's 1870. It's now 5 years after the Civil War. And once again, we have more of a realistic depiction of his deathbed scene, and it is men who are in the room with him. President Andrew Johnson dies in 1875. And here is his wife, Eliza. There is one portrait of Eliza, but she is, again, just a weeping woman standing there with some of his other daughters, with the doctors and other men, important men. In 1877, Ulysses S. Grant dies. Now we're getting into a more realistic look at Victorian death. And what's cool about this is I really kind of like this. It's much more intimate. This is really the pic, like a drawing of the family. There's Julia with her back to us, and she's holding his hand. You see his daughter Nell next to her, and then the other people in the room are his 3 sons and their daughters, or their wives. And that gentleman with the beard, that's Julia's father. So you have a very intimate look of family. Next is the assassination of James Garfield in 1881. And again, now you have the ability to show the drama of the fallen president. He was shot in the back at the train station in Washington, D.C. They brought a mattress, as you can see down that he lays on there. And there's the doctors attending him. They're trying to find the bullet. They stick their dirty fingers in the hole trying to find the bullet. And that is what kills him, not the bullet, but the dirty fingers. He gets terribly, dies from infection. The whole country is really caught up in, it takes 90 days for President Garfield to pass away. And large bulletins, as this print shows us, are shown. And you see official bulletin at 8:30 a.m. The president was somewhat restless and vomited several times during the early part of the night. Then you see at 12:30, another, this is what the country was doing. Everyone, and you look at the hordes, this is showing you a city scene, but there were broadsides where they would tack up. Everyone was very caught up in how was our president doing. Oh, sorry, that's a little blurry, but this is a scene of Garfield. Again, no deathbed scene curtain. This is based more on real life. He's in the White House and it's very stifling. So you see Lucretia is fanning him. You see there were 6 doctors, 6 or 7, there were lots of doctors, but there were 6 kind of superstar doctors who were taking care of Garfield, and they appear a lot in a lot of these prints. It becomes clear that Garfield is not going to make it, so he's taken by train to Eberron, New Jersey. And there's this beautiful drawing of him with Lucretia with the seaside, it's cooler air so that he can get some relief from the immense heat from his suffering while he's suffering from his fatal wound. And here is the deathbed scene. You have the six doctors, who are, of course, the superstars. You have Lucretia and Molly, his daughter. You don't see Lucretia's face now, but you see Molly weeping, again, showing the piety, the caring, the nurturing of the woman. In this final scene, I wanted to show you, what I wanted to show you especially about this is there was one woman doctor, and there she is. You actually can see her face. She's often identified as a nurse. She was Dr. Susan Edson. She was actually the Garfield's family physician. And so she did make it in this depiction of the death scene. If you notice to your left, though, those two little boys, that's Irving and Abram Garfield. They were not there at the deathbed scene. They were in Mentor, being cared for by family. So again, this is kind of showing you, it's still kind of like reality TV. They're showing what they want you to see and what they want, the emotion that they want you to get out of this scene too. I wanted to also bring up Caroline Harrison, who died in the White House in 1892. She was kind of the spearhead of why I wanted to do this year. She gets her own, which is really cool. This is unique for women. She gets her own deathbed scene because she was dying in the White House. And as First Lady, you see a kind of a switcheroo there, but notice you see the President Benjamin Harrison. You do see his face. He's holding her hand. That's her family, her two children and their siblings, and the doctors and nurses. There is this woman here standing to the right hand side who is in mourning and probably maybe a family member. She is showing you the role of the wife, the woman who mourns. And Caroline Harrison even gets her face on the front of a magazine. This is really unique for a woman in Victorian times, if they're not Queen of England, right? And this is showing you some of the scenes of her funeral, and at the very bottom there's the casket being taken out of the White House. Very nice things that they did for Caroline Harrison. Finally, we're going to discuss. We're going to look at the last kind of bit of the Victorian era of drawings and lithography and prints, where you. This time, as usual, you are showing the action. Here's President William McKinley being shot. And here he is on his deathbed. That's Ida being depicted on the left-hand side there. But of course, you don't see her face. But she is, of course, with him and nurturing him in his time of need. And here she is. Over looking at his casket. Again, we see her with the appropriate weeping first woman with, but without seeing her face. I also wanted to show you that some of our Victorian traditions were still carried into the 20th century, and I think you can still see some of that even today. I wanted to show you, here's Florence Harding. In 1924, this is her husband died in 1923. He died while he was a president. But here she is. She's using a mourning stationery, a very thin line of black, but she is still using that. She, of course, was born during the Victorian era, so she's still using these things, and that's still these influences how they continue on. Through the decades. And finally, I wanted to show you this picture of Jacqueline Kennedy. Sorry, this is just a photo that we have, this is in a frame. This is actually in our collection. But as you can see here, Jacqueline Kennedy, she's using the same Victorian mourning rituals that are appropriate for women to do in using the thick line of mourning for the fallen president, President Kennedy, in 1963. This is a letter that was written to a woman who wrote to the Kennedys, and she got this letter from Nancy Tuckerman. She was actually young. You can read that says Miss Janie Beale, and she had written this to them, and she framed it. It was one of her highly prized and meant a lot to her that they had sent this to her. That is my presentation for tonight. I wanted to thank all of you for coming. The next time we do Talk with a Curator, it'll be December 15th. And we're going to do the Clinton White House Christmas cards. So I hope you've enjoyed that presentation. I'm happy to take questions. I'll try to answer them as best I can. Like I said, it's kind of just an overview here. There we go.
Michelle, thank you so much. That was wonderful and so interesting. I wondered if you could answer a question about the prints. Were they published and sold as artwork? Were they included in newspapers or magazines? How were they disseminated?
They could be found in magazines for sure. Frank Leslie's Weekly. There's several of them. And of course, you could cut them out and save them yourselves. That was what was so nice. It was so nice for everyone. They had the possibility to see and to share in this experience of mourning president.
There's so much conversation in the chat.
Oh,
People
good.
are really interested in discussing the details of some of these assassinations.
Yes.
How Garfield died, the details. So we won't get into all of that, but one of the questions that I thought was pretty interesting was about the stone tablets, the updates related to Garfield's death. Were those preserved at all?
Good question. I don't know. I have actually seen at the Western Reserve Historical Society, where most of his, a lot of the Garfield family's artifacts and belongings are. I've actually seen broadsides that were showing you, and you can still see like the nail holes where they were tacked up, and they tell you that the president is very ill. Here was his temperature. I mean, this poor man, everybody knew what his temperature was, what kind of, what he was able to hold down, what he was able to eat. It was amazing. But it was 90 days, and it really captured this country's heartstrings. It's very dramatic.
One of the other things that came up in the discussion was related to the enslaved people depicted in the prints. It was interesting to see them there. I've wondered if part of it was trying to make a statement from a presidential point of view or administrative point of view about slavery. We've talked about this, the two of us, before, so that the Washington's desire to free their slaves. They knew that in their hearts that possibly slavery was wrong, or they wanted to be depicted as good masters. So they included them in the imagery. Can you talk a little bit more about the inclusion of enslaved people in these depictions?
I just find it amazing that they're there. And I think there's so many cool ways that you can read this. I am not at all an expert in what all that means. And you have to take it for the times and how it was, what they were trying to accomplish. And I wish I knew more about those, but I find now that all of this is happening in our times now, how interesting it is that they do include these images of slaves in the deathbed scene, and what it is trying to say exactly. And I would, if anyone has any interests or knows anything more about that, I mean, I'm anxious to find out more myself.
It's something to explore more. And I know in some of those Washington illustrations, even non-death ones, they're present.
Right. Right. And we know that he freed his slaves, but Martha's slaves weren't freed. And Martha became scared that they were going to kill her so that they could be freed. So she let them go free. It gets really murky. And it's part of our history that we're still trying to come to grips with. It's ugly.
I also wondered if you could address Mary Lincoln is often criticized by her contemporaries for her excessive mourning, but here the woman plays that role of the weeping woman, the mourner. What was the length of mourning period? What was acceptable? Because here it's a major part of the iconography that it's happening, that women are involved and engaged in it.
And that's what's so frustrating about it, is it seemed like a woman could mourn and was expected to mourn. At least it seems like 2 years was pretty. Deep mourning was 1 year for sure. You were going to be deeply mourning. Then it got murky, and I think it became a class thing. It became what some people accepted was how people are. They just kind of talk about what they're trying to say, whether that's real or not. And poor Mary Lincoln just. I think because she mourned so much and so excessively, but who's to say what is right or wrong? But she really is very criticized, and wrongly so, for the loss of like Jackie Kennedy. Abraham Lincoln was sitting right next to her, and he was shot in the head, and he fell on her. And I'm sure her dress had blood on it too. So there wasn't a film of that. There wasn't that. You only have what you have here. You have these prints. And so it's harder for us to, I think that people just didn't have that constant, like we do now, the constant TV, the constant photos that you can see over and over and over again. To reinforce, oh, this was traumatic for this woman. So they were like, the war's over, we want to get happy again, and you're still in mourning.
I also was curious about when these kind of went out of style, because photography is happening during the 19th century, kind of parallel to this. And grieving photographs. I mean, we saw Mary Lincoln dressed in black, but we also know that there were much more intimate photos of death, that people took photographs of departed children. It was very common. Can you speak to the transition to photography, or how these went out of style? I mean, we're talking a little bit about Kennedy and films of assassination, but I'm curious how media and the development of media plays a role in these images.
Right. That's a good question. Honestly, I think it has something to do, again, with the Civil War and that Victorian era. And if you think about it, that's why it ends with William McKinley. He's really the last Civil War president. And who comes after him but Teddy Roosevelt? And he's young, he's got kids, and there's been this terrible sadness, and he brings youth and the children and all that. And so I think that's when you kind of see this turn to photographs are more common, are more easily accessible, and people are beginning to change over to seeing pictures, actual pictures of things, as opposed to an artist's depiction of something. I think that might have something to do with it. Just that kind of, you're used to the Victorian print and it telling you this vibrant thing, and now people are going, oh, well, I can see this picture of the actual person now.
Yeah, it's almost within the tradition of the history painting. So something like really European, like creating a narrative, creating a story. So that's another interesting element that this plays on. And thinking about during the Civil War, some of those photographs that were doctored by Matthew Brady. So creating your own narrative of what happened versus the reality of what happened.
And you get into the spiritualism. I didn't show that. I just was worried about time, but I could have gone off on the spiritualism and seances and how, and Mary Lincoln, of course, with the double exposures that they were doing. All of that plays into that high Victorian emotional aspect of death. And I saw somebody talking about, yes, and there's the death of children, and the pictures of children in death, and pictures of people in caskets. That, we don't really do that now. It's kind of considered kind of bad taste. But I think for certain people, I know, I think I saw someone say, I have pictures of I do too, in my family. I've seen a picture of my, I don't know, some great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother in her coffin. And clearly, and I remember my grandmother showing that to me, and it was like this precious thing, because it was going to be the last time you saw that person. You didn't have photographs or films and that kind of thing.
And losing children was so prevalent at the time. So having some kind of souvenir of their existence. And we see that so much with the first ladies, losing children very young.
Absolutely.
Well, Michelle, it sounds like we already have next October's talk keyed up here with the first ladies in spiritualism. Maybe we can look at the Mumler photographs and talk about seances. So I'm very excited about that. Thank you to you, Michelle, and thank you to everyone who shared in the chat. We heard from people sharing a lot of fun facts about presidential assassinations and deaths, to sharing personal stories about family death. So again, we are so happy to have these conversations with our virtual visitors and program attendees about history, about the First Ladies, and making personal connections with your own lives and experiences. So please keep sharing with us, and head over to our Eventbrite page or our social media and sign up for our next program. I know Michelle's going to be looking at the Clintons' Christmas cards. We have a lot of holiday programs coming up, so I know people aren't in that holiday mindset yet, but it's soon, and we're going to be excited about it. I think it's going to be really fun, as always. So thank you so much. This has been a lovely discussion, and please join us Monday for Cooking with the First Ladies.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Good night.